So, welcome back, Phil. It was the middle of April when we last had you on the podcast, episode 49, and you were telling me about this ultra race that you were going to do called Race to the King. We're recording this on the Monday after the race over the weekend. So, how did it go?
Well, I did what I wanted to do, Trevor, and that was cross the finish line with my hands in the air. After that second, I looked a bit bedraggled and a lot worse for wear, but I did what I set out to do. That's what I keep saying to myself over the last couple of days. I don't know about you, but I found myself overanalyzing all the things that I could do better as opposed to the things that I achieved on the day, which is a bit disappointing, really. But I guess that's just the last initial reaction, kind of like still taking it all in, still processing it. But the bottom line is I saw myself across the line. But the big headline was there was no king there to give me my medal, which I was really gutted about. He'd gone home for the day, bless him. I missed him by 2 hours. And so, he was definitely there. My dad was there as my support crew, and he went down to the finish quite early doors to sort of suss out the area. And he said, yeah, he was definitely there, and people were getting their photographs taken with him and everything. But I didn't get there till 8:30. And he'd gone home. So unfortunately, I got my medal, but it wasn't from the king. So I said on a Facebook forum, quite tongue-in-cheek, maybe they should call it Race to the Cathedral instead of Race to the King, because there's no king there. But there you go. I'll get over it.
So now tell us a little bit about because have I got this right? That you started at Goodwood Racecourse.
Yes.
And then you ended up along the South Downs way at Winchester Cathedral, around about 53 miles in total.
That's right. Absolutely. It was lovely to start at Goodwood. That was a slight change right at the very end. They changed that at the last minute. So that threw a few people. But yeah, very exciting start. Lots of, massive, imagine turning up to one of the biggest race courses in the UK and starting off. COVID start. So everybody was literally left to go when they wanted, a bit like you, I think, on your ultra. Went off fine, had all my stuff ready, and the first half went really, really well. I mean, we can talk about the whole thing if you want, but yeah,
let's do. I'd like, because listeners will be really interested to know, because I think, was this technically your first ultra, or had you slipped in something before that?
Well, because of COVID and all the races being cancelled, I had a few cancelled races beforehand. I was trying to build up to it a little bit. I thought, maybe I should do a half marathon or a trail marathon here or there and stuff. Things were being put back or deferred, and so I had a local event called the Shires and Spires, which is quite nice in Northamptonshire. It had a lot of churches en route and things like that in Northamptonshire, beautiful countryside where I live. And so I'll do that as a build up to give me confidence that I can get to this distance. And it was 35 miles. And it was 4 weeks before the Race to the King. So looking back, I shouldn't have done that, because I tapered for that event, which means I lost 2 weeks of training. And then I rested afterwards, because 35 miles is still a long way. If you've never run that far before, which I hadn't, and there was a lot of road sections, there's a lot flat. So I actually did quite a lot of running on that day. So I think I missed 3 weeks of training building up to Race to the King, which was only 4 weeks after. And my mindset was, they're just hills, they'll be fine. But I think I definitely struggled from that. So all these people, you think, oh, maybe I should do a build-up race. I think it's more important what you did, and that was the back-to-back weekends. And that's what I missed out on. I think running on the tired legs would have been more beneficial than doing the 35-mile race that I did 4 weeks before. So the back-to-back training runs that you did, Trevor, that you mentioned, after yours, I think would have been a better way of building up to it for sure. So that's definitely a tip. Don't do a practice ultra where you've not done an ultra before. That was silly. But I didn't get injured from it, but I think I definitely lacked some training, from that.
Yeah, well, I think certainly with me, and it sounds like with yourself, Phil, as well. We go into this not having done this before, and
yeah,
the one thing you do come out of it is with lots of tips and ideas and lessons that everyone else can benefit from. So that's a great tip for the listeners to this podcast who are thinking about doing their first ultra. Don't do a practice ultra 4 weeks before. Yeah, top tip.
No.
So what time did it all kick off from Goodwood Racecourse then?
Well, we went in waves. There's about 7 or 8 different waves of people, and you were given a wave time. My wave time was 7:10 in the morning. I think there was one before me at 6:30. So I sort of turned up 20 minutes before, got dropped off by my dad, who was my support crew, if you like, in the morning. And then they just said, actually, you can go when you want, because we're just sort of letting people drip out. So I left at 7:10. And there was a base camp where you've noticed on their website where all their little tents were lined up. It was an overcast day, so I get the idea that would be great if it was a nice sunny afternoon and you could relax and put your feet up and have a beer and cheer people in, but it was a bit overcast, a bit miserable. So I think the people that might have signed up for that, I think probably missed out a little bit. I think I would have been a bit bored. I don't know about you. If I got there about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I have to wait till the next day to get going again. So
yeah, well, if we could just make sure listeners know what you're talking about there, because
sorry, yeah,
that's because this race, you can split it in two, can't you? You run it on the Saturday and the Sunday, and you run. I think you run 23 miles on the Saturday, as you say. Get to the base camp, stay overnight, do 30 on the Sunday. Is that about right? As far as you know?
It's an amazing inclusive event for that. I mean, literally, you could turn up as a group of friends and walk the whole way. You could base and then stay at the base camp, and over an overnight single man tent. You have to take a little blow up mattress with you, and obviously a couple of like an overnight bag, if you like, so you can have your little whatever you need, chargers and stuff like that with you. So yeah, it's very inclusive. That's what I love about it. There was so many different types of people taking part in the morning, and then you could you could walk there, and then you could walk the whole thing. I mean, I know people that were turning up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, walking it all the way through on the Saturday. But I think, yeah, if it was a nice, lovely day and you just wanted to take your time, and you've already noted in your previous podcast, Trevor, how lovely the aid stations were. So it was just one long picnic, really, all day. So you don't necessarily need a crew for that sort of ultra. It's a great way of. That's why I picked it. Really, it was a good introduction for me, I think, to do ultra running, and you certainly learn what you want and what you can stomach on your way around as well, which is another thing that I found out.
So how did the eating and drinking go? Because as you say on the website, it looked like you were walking into a running nutrition shop at every aid station. It looked stacked out. Or was that just a picture, or was that what it was like?
They were really stacked out, and people were still moaning about that, because on normal years, normal non-COVID years, they would do like peanut butter and jam sandwiches and slices of cake and all these sort of things that you can actually, and slices of watermelon and stuff that like you had. But because of the COVID restrictions, it was more about the sponsors that were sponsoring the event. So you had all these Perkia bars and all these other sort of protein bars, but there was bananas on site. There was loads of sweets. There was loads of chocolate. There was coffee. Obviously, there was toilets at every single pit stop as well. So, I mean, and there was obviously water. But I decided, because I trained with Tailwind, which is like an electrolyte sort of carbohydrate drink, that I would take Tailwind and just top up with some the occasional snack, if you like. And that's what I did. I even wrote on each sachet of Tailwind that I carried with me which checkpoint I was going to take it at, because I didn't want to think about it later on, because some had caffeine in it and some didn't. So I didn't want to eat all the caffeine ones too early or get it wrong. So yeah, that was a bit of a faff, getting the Tailwind out of a sachet and pouring it into your water drink. But it definitely worked. I definitely did have a problem with my stomach, but I don't know what that was down to. I mean, it did go away. So, hindsight, once again, an amazing thing. I've read it. I watched so many podcasts and taken all the advice, and all the advice is there will be a moment in the ultra marathon where you will be feeling terrible, you'll feel lousy, and you'll be quite sweary, and you might think you won't want to carry on. And that definitely happened, and I was in that space. But they're right. It comes back. You actually start to feel better later on. So if you stick with it, then, and you feel like you can, and you're not injured, haven't gone over on your ankle or twisted or hurt yourself, then you should crack on, because you will start to feel better. And I think about 100 people did DNF on the day apparently.
Did they? Whereabouts did you have that moment then, Phil? How far were you in?
Well,
more than a couple of miles, I assume.
I had a really good idea and a really bad idea. The good idea, which turned out to be the same thing. So I decided that my son, who's 13, wanted to run part of the course with me. He's 13 years old, and I thought, oh, that's great. But because he's 13, I thought he's not going to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and want to be with me near the beginning. So what I'll do is I'll get him to join me later on in the event. And I thought, well, so I worked out what sort of time a teenage boy would normally get up. And I said, why don't you join me at mile 30? And it was like, yeah, that sounds great. But mile 30 is quite a long way into an ultra event. You know, you just run a marathon, you're going up and down hills quite a lot. You've gone through quite a lot of aid stations. And when I got to the point where I was supposed to meet them, there was a little miscommunication on both sides of where it was going to be. And they weren't there when I got there. And I rang them up and I said, "Where are you?" And they said, we've gone to base camp, on to pit stop 3. I said, "No, I've already gone past pit stop 3. I'm at so-and-so, that place where I said." And they were like, "Oh, no, sorry. I'll be there in 10 minutes." So I had to sit down for 10 minutes and wait for them to arrive. So that was quite difficult to deal with right at that very moment. But I turned it into a positive afterwards, changed my socks, which is always a great thing to do, isn't it? Change your socks, sit down. Loads of people going past me. It's like, but I got over it. And then he jumps out the car and he's like, you know, let's go. And I'm like just 30 miles in. And then we have the biggest hill on the course called Butser Hill. It's very, very famous. I'll try and send you a picture of it. I think it's like 300 feet or something. And so I moaned to him quite a lot. So that was the moment, I think. So it was the best time and the best idea, but probably the worst time I could have probably done it. But he loved it. He was really impressed. I mean, he was with me. He wasn't allowed to go into the pit stops, but he sort of sat on the outskirts of each one. There was 2 he was with me with. He did about 8.5 miles. He doesn't normally run, so
Oh,
it was
excellent.
great.
Fantastic.
You know, I got him a little packet of Skittles and a packet of, a couple of bags of sweets from the pit stop just to give him. But he was impressed with it. You know, it's so to see maybe when he's older that it's something he might want to do. And, you know, there's some lovely, stunning views up on the South Downs when you get up these hills. It's worth the effort of going up these big hills. But yeah, so that was good and bad at the same time. And that was when I was complaining the most. But the good thing is, and that's another thing that you did, Trevor, was just I had the opportunity to change my footwear because I had crew. I overheard somebody talking at one of the pit stops that, or you might need some sort of, you know, more cushioned shoes for the next section. And I thought, I've got some road shoes in my dad's car. So I took the advantage and put them on. Whether or not it was a mental thing, whether or not the change of the feet actually did help, but I managed then to start running again after that. When I say running, run walking, you know, run a bit, walk a bit. So overall, I averaged about 15 minutes per mile over the whole event, which actually thinking about it is pretty good.
Yeah.
For the first go for a 50 miler. Never got anywhere near that before. So yeah, lessons learned, to be honest, mate. That's what it's all about, isn't it? But I did enjoy it. It's a beautiful event, really well put on, and I made sure I thanked all the volunteers at each aid station or pit stop that I went through, for sure.
Great. Well, I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes. And I know Threshold Sports have got 2 or 3 other similar events that they run. So I'll put a link into those. They've got Race to the Castle, Race to the Stones, Race to the Tower, and Race to the King, who'd gone home early. So
I know.
Yeah. So Phil, for those listening, you know, what would be your 2 or 3 top tips that you learn either about yourself or that you could pass on to the listeners who are thinking of tackling something like this for the first time?
Gosh. You've got to be fluid on the day. You can't like have a very rigid, if you're one of these people that plan things meticulously, you're going to have to be ready for things to change, I think. And so you've got to try and realize that you've got to be flexible and you've got to go with the changes like I did with my son. And at that moment, you know, you've got to be able to talk to yourself and say, right, this has changed from my plan. You're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to change it as well. And another thing I noticed that somebody else picked up at, a group of ladies ran together. They decided to run together as a group of friends. And one lady felt really bad about herself because she couldn't keep up with the rest of her friends. They were all different, slightly different. You know, everybody has a different build-up. Everybody's got a different running exercise levels that they've got, stamina levels or whatever. And she felt really awful that they kept having to wait for her. So if you're going to do one of these things first time, it might feel like a good idea to do it as a group, but if you're not walking it and you're running it, that's not a good thing. It's you versus the finish line. So yes, there's plenty of people on the course that you will run, that you can talk with and keep you company and chat with and motivate you and stuff like that, but never put yourself under the pressure of trying to keep up with other runners, because that can lead into all sorts of problems. I know we do it sort of naturally a little bit. You know, there's always somebody in front of us, and you know, I've heard you do it on some of your training runs and some of the events that you've done, but it's not a good thing to try and keep up with them, is it? I don't think so. That's another very, very good tip. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
the other thing is, the last thing is, which I don't agree, maybe, I don't know, but I think you can sit down and take it easy for a couple of minutes at each pit stop if you want to. Don't feel that you have to keep going and keep going and keep going. And, you know, if you need 5 minutes to have a coffee or to sort yourself out, and it's your first ultra and you've never gone that far before, give yourself a break and do that, because it will help you mentally as well as physically. And to be honest, anybody could do this if they put the training in. Anybody that could dedicate themselves to do the training to get up to these mileage and be happy to take their time and have a bit of support like you did and like I did, you're going to do it, and you're going to make, and it's very emotional. It's very emotionally draining. It's an amazing feeling when you cross that line. You've been building up to it for a long time, and it's a great feeling of achievement, and it's thoroughly worth it. I recommend it to anybody. Absolutely.
And I agree with that bit about sitting down. I remember January 2020, I was part of the support team at Penzance for an event down here in Cornwall called the Arc of Attrition, which is
great event.
there's a 50-mile and a 100-mile version.
Looks
And I remember
scary.
it's kind of in January, so most of it's in the dark on the similar path, you know, the similar course that I ran the classic quarter on. And I remember the guy who was the favourite, I suppose, and ultimately did win it. And he came into the Penzance aid station about, I don't know, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And he just sat down. He just sat down and he took his time and he had some food. And the guy who was in second place, came in, snatched a bit of food and ran straight out again. As though, oh, I'm in the lead now, you know, like in the Grand Prix, you'd undercut him in the pits almost, you know?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I watched the video on YouTube and you're exactly right. He sat down, didn't he? Drank his soup.
I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head now, but I do remember him sitting there very calmly, taking his time. And then when he was ready to go, he went out and apparently he did that at another aid station 20 miles from the end. And he still, you know, the other guy came in, went ahead of him, but he still won the race. So it's like you say, I think also in training, you mentioned it there, as I noticed in my training, especially in the last few weeks, that, you know, if people said, oh, do you want to come for a run? And I was saying, well, no, not really, because you're going to go too fast for me. And I'm training at quite a slow pace now and things like that. So yeah, no, great. And Phil, when you came on the podcast in April, you talked about the bus driver, you know, that mental image. So did the bus driver pop along at all during the race?
Yeah, it's weird. And you gain so much more from, you know, experience. And I was obviously, you know, I do pride myself in my positive mindset, absolutely, as you know. And, you know, I did bash on about all that sort of stuff. But I think you really do find out more about yourself when you're actually doing it. And so I'd had these mantras going in and what I was going to say to myself. But actually, the mantra that I stuck with was run when you can and walk when you can, and walk if you have to, and stick to that. You know, I had all these things, you know, like, you know, so what, and don't give up, and posture and all that sort of stuff. But when it starts to physically and mentally get tiring, what I'm trying to say here, Trevor, is it's the physical side of going that far that I underestimated. The mental side was fine. And, you know, to keep yourself upbeat and perky, just chat to everybody, be fun, you know, thank everybody and all that sort of stuff. So he didn't really make an appearance, but I probably underestimated the physical changes that it does to you as the day goes on. And that obviously can affect your mind a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And how are you feeling a couple of days later? Are you still kind of buzzing, or have you slept really well, or what's the situation?
I've got, my ankles are hurting. I have my ankle up. My left ankle's swelled up quite a lot for some reason. And I've but my good wife, she's helped me with put my feet up and looking after me a little bit. Put sort of like a hot cold press on it or whatever. So that's sort of helping. Yeah, I'm still sort of thinking about the good things and the bad things. I took a camera with me, a 360 video camera, which I had to carry all the way because I didn't have any room in my backpack. Oh, that's another last quick tip, Trevor. If you're going over 50 kilometers, have a decent size backpack so you can carry a couple more things. I didn't have enough room in my little backpack that I had.
Okay.
And I had to carry this little camera. And so I'm hoping I can put together some sort of video of the event, and I'll put it onto YouTube, and I'll send you a link when it's done. But it did run out of battery at 40 miles. And that's another thing. I thought, why I thought that was going to last all day on one battery, I don't know. So that's another thing that I learned. Take a spare battery for your camera.
Well, I was when I did the 44-mile event, my phone ran out of battery with about 8 miles to go, and I had been, recording snippets for the podcast, and I had got a phone charger with my crew, but it was just too much of a faff around at that stage, So, okay, so are you thinking about doing this again at some point? Doing another one?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing next, which might surprise you, and that is I have decided that I'm going to start to try and transition over to barefoot running shoes.
Okay.
Because of my ankles, because of my weak ankles, I've experienced this a little bit before, and because I want to continue trail running for as long as I possibly can, into my 50s, 60s, 70s, and onwards, I think the best place to start. I've read somewhere or watched a video somewhere that actually your core starts on your feet. And so a lot of people don't think about their feet as being an important part of the whole process. And if you can look after your feet and have good, strong feet and good, strong ankles, that is really going to help you become a better, more efficient runner and allow you to run for a lot longer. So I'm going to give it a go of transitioning over to barefoot shoes. I've got a pair of Vivo barefoot running shoes, and I'm gonna also track that via video as well on a YouTube channel that I've just started up. So am I going to do a long event again? Probably, but not for a while I'm doing this transition, because you've got to go way, way, way down. You're literally going to have to run 50, 60 meters on your first run and build up very, very slowly, because obviously it's a completely different way of running than you normally do. And I'm going to just track it and see how long it takes. It could take 6 months, it could take a year, but maybe in the future try and do a half marathon, trail run marathon on one of them, or realize it's not for me and it doesn't work. But that's what I'm doing next. I'm going to try and transition to barefoot running shoes. So wish me luck on that one.
Well, Phil, I think what we'll do is we'll make contact in a few months' time and see how you're getting on, and we may well get you back on the podcast to talk about that transition and check in and see how you're doing on that.
Of course, yeah.
Thanks very much for coming back on the show and telling us all about your adventure to race the King. So and yeah, it sounds as though you had a nice day out anyway.
I had a lovely day out. It was fantastic. Yeah, lovely people, lovely runners, and the whole event was fantastic. So yeah, it was great. And thanks for asking me to come back on, mate.
No, it's great, and thanks for sharing your tips with our listeners. And and I'll put all the links in the show notes to the event and the other events that they do. So Phil, good luck with the transition, and thanks very much for sharing all of your time with us again today.
My pleasure, mate. Take care for now.